matter. He's gained international recognition for his public support of the Black Lives Matter movement, women's rights, other activist and social justice causes. In 2017, he was named one of the 100 most influential African Americans by The Root, was the Seahawks nominee for the NFL's Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, was honored along with his brother Martellus with a BET Shine a Light Award. Bennett donates all of his endorsement money and the proceeds from jersey sales to health and education projects for poor and underserved youth and minority communities. And, it's a long sentence, and recently expanded his reach globally to support STEM programs in Africa. He's in conversation tonight with Jesse Hagopian, who's a longtime friend of Town Hall. He teaches ethnic studies and is the co-advisor to the Black Student Union at Garfield High. He's an editor, that's right, Garfield in the house. He's an editor for the social justice periodical Rethinking Schools, the co-editor of the just-released book Teaching for Black Lives, and the editor of the book, all right, More Than a Score, The New Uprising Against High-Stakes Testing. In 2015, Jesse received Seattle's King County NAACP Service Award, that's what it was, and was named an Education Fellow to the Progressive Magazine, as well as the Cultural Freedom Fellow for the Lannan Foundation for his nationally recognized work in promoting critical thinking and opposing high-stakes testing. Michael's book, Things That Make White People Uncomfortable, is the subject of tonight's talk. It was also the subject of last night's talk with journalist Art Thiel, which, this is true, marks the first time in almost 20 years of this organization that we've hosted a speaker on back-to-back nights. It's a big deal for us, and it's a sincere pleasure to almost close out this season at Town Hall by welcoming Jesse Hagopian and Michael Bennett.
Right. Hey, happy Juneteenth to you, Michael.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And happy Juneteenth to everyone here. And happy Juneteenth to those who are live streaming on Facebook. And there's a lot of white people here. I don't know if...
let me get a glass of water on that.
I don't know if Town Hall gave you the most uncomfortable seat, just in keeping with the theme of tonight.
A glass of water?
Yeah, I'll have a glass of water. Thank you, sir. Man, it's so good to be here with you, especially after all the nonsense that you had to go through, and we had to postpone the first one. But to be here right now, after all the work you put in on this book, is really special. I'm really excited to be here with you tonight.
Yeah, I'm super excited too to be able to come back to basically my second home, because Seattle is where a lot of stuff happened for me, and where I was able to have a child, build my foundation, and meet a lot of people and do a lot of work in this city. So to be here right now is just everything, and I'm very humble, I'm grateful, and I'm just honored to be able to have this many people show up to a book event. Usually people show up to jerseys and when you sign in jerseys, but to people to respect you as an intellectual and to be able to come and share your story with them is super unique.
No doubt. Man, this city's gonna miss you after all your identity is wrapped up in this city, and we're gonna miss the sack dance.
Yeah. But I'm not leaving this city that's what's the crazy thing about sports is we talked about this before, it's like they can trade you from a city for sports, but they can't trade you for being a part of the city. See, me, I'm a part of the city because my foundation and everything I do for the community is still going on. Regardless if I'm here or not, I still come back and I still do all the stuff that I promised that I said I was going to do. There's so many people that I've made promises to that I got to keep up with.
No doubt. And I think I looked at the schedule, and I don't think you play the Seahawks this year.
No, Russell Wilson's lucky.
Oh, he got lucky.
Rashad Penny, Paul Allen, Pete Carroll. I'm not going to sleep I'll sleep every day, eat perfect every night to play the Seahawks.
Right.
Bobby, you know, Bobby. It go.
Right on. So you have a chapter in the book called The Brotherhood that really like looks at the unique locker room that is the Seattle Seahawks, or at least was.
Yeah.
And you know, for me, like I really got into the Seahawks first when Marshawn Lynch kind of claimed his humanity and refused to just answer all these questions the media wanted. And then when I saw you claim your humanity by answering the questions, but on your own terms, like saying like when Marshawn did Beast Mode 2.0, like what'd you say? Like the greatest run since the Underground Railroad?
Yeah. It was.
That's what drew me in, made me want to be a Seahawks fan. Like, talk about these guys in the locker room.
I think it's not very often that you are able to create a family atmosphere. I think for the Seahawks, the people that I play with, whether it was Bobby or KJ or Richard, Earl or Cam or Cliff, all these people are like brothers to me. You know, the first thing you ask them is not how you feeling, it's like, how's your family doing? You know, because we were connected on a spiritual level, and so we knew what the other was doing at all times because we spent so much time together. We would talk and we would have real conversation. We never ever talked about sports. You know, Bobby would come to my locker like, what you reading? And then I'd throw it to him and then we would talk about it. Or he'll ask me a question, I'll ask him a question. Or Cliff, we just had like a real family atmosphere. So it was like every time we took the field, we knew that the person next to us, they was playing for the person next to them. And it wasn't about, they were ever playing about themselves. It was like, if Bobby wanted me to hold a gap for him, I would do it because I knew that he wanted me to do it. And I felt like if you had people on your team that made you feel like that, it was easy to go on the field like that. And I think the brotherhood that we share, we also took it from the field into the community. I mean, you go to a lot of teams, and my brother, he always used to be jealous of our team because he used to say, man, I've never been around a team that all you guys are always hanging out. You know, there's guys.
Talking about Martellus.
Yeah, my brother Martellus, he'd be like, man, I couldn't wait to get on a team like that. And that's how our team was. We took it from the field into the community, and we would do all types of works together. And whoever called and was like, hey, can you show up? We would be there on time and make sure that we were able to lend a helping hand. And I think that's what made us a unique team. And I think the city of Seattle will never, ever see something like that again because that's like a once-in-a-lifetime type of opportunity where we were so selfless that we never talked about ourselves. We always talked about the guy next to us. And that's why we forever be brothers and beyond the sports, you know, beyond the wins. It's about, man, how you doing? How you feeling? What you been up to? Texting out of nowhere and just be like, hey, you the best I ever played with. Just to remind them, like, we didn't take any moment for granted.
No doubt, no doubt. That's beautiful, man. Yeah. We could feel it in this city, too.
Yeah.
Besides the brotherhood in the locker room, I mean, you talk a lot in the book about your actual family, and you're pretty raw and open about that. And I remember Dave and I went to your house to do some of the early talks about the book, and we were talking about your mom.
Yeah.
And it was like, wasn't long after you had just reconnected with her.
Yeah, no, but that was a really interesting moment too. I know usually I get choked up about it, but I said, no, I'm not getting choked up about it tonight. I'm gonna talk through it, but you know, that was a really interesting time though, because it was 4 men in there crying when we were like going over the edit, and we were just all connected because you guys are my friends, so you knew the pain that I was sharing and how I was like, man, I don't know if I really want to be that open to people. And you know, guys and everybody was just saying like, just be vulnerable. I think, you know, to be able to be vulnerable and to be able to forgive somebody for something that you feel like they wronged you is a hard thing to do. But once you do it, it just frees you. You know what I'm saying? You kind of just don't hold on to the anger and the pain, and there you have to find a way to find empathy and compassion. And for me, that was like a true journey, you know, to be able to forgive my mother and build up that relationship. Because honestly, I honestly felt that if I didn't forgive my mother, I could never love my wife to the maximum of my ability. I couldn't be the greatest father I could possibly be if I couldn't like forgive my mom.
No, I mean, we were in that room, you had us all sobbing.
Oh man, I know, but that's the truth, you know. It's like, for an athlete, you built on the bravo and the, how you come up and how strong you are and how you are able to play through certain things, but you never ever share with kids the ability to be vulnerable. And I think that's what I wanted to share with kids through this book, is to be able to be very vulnerable and be real with them and let them know, like, if you're dealing with something that's bothering you, to be able to let go. I think a lot of players, they deal with depression because we have no outlets. We have no way to be able to cry. We almost like the military, because we're never able to get off, and we always have to play through injuries, and nobody ever cares about how you feel. And so for us as a player, we want to find those ways to have those outlets, so we don't have these, suicidal thoughts, or these thoughts where we abusing our wives or not being the father that we could possibly be. Because a lot of players, they deal with the family issues, but nobody's there to talk to them. And I think a lot of coaches don't have that outlets. I think the Seahawks are very rare in that, because we're the only team that has a team psychiatrist for people to be able to talk through traumatic issues that happen to them, because we all deal with traumatic issues, and all of us are masked up, and we try not to let anybody into our true circle or our true feelings, because nobody ever wants to be seen as weak, But vulnerability is not a weakness; it's a strength. It's the ability to be able to open up and share the truth of how you really feeling.
No, man, that's the power of this book, that you are vulnerable in it, and the fact that you allow me to be vulnerable that way, like, that's a lesson that I'll take with me forever, that it's okay, that we can have emotions.
Yeah, we have to have emotions. I think not having emotions is what allowed things to happen like they do now, to not have empathy, not to have compassion. And that's why we fight about the border issues. When we, as human beings, we should have empathy and compassion for somebody losing their child. We all have children, and to think of your mind to be thinking that, a mother is detached from the child that they birthed is a hard thing to swallow. And I think those things, and being able to be vulnerable, things like that won't happen. And I think those are the things that we got to be connected to. You look at police brutality, when we're looking at somebody, you stop and you got to see them for a human. And I think not being vulnerable and not have empathy and not having compassion has brought us into a world that is scary sometimes. And I think the ability to be able to talk about that and have men, especially men, to connect to their feelings is something that we really have to move forward in in a society.
No doubt. Thank you. And going on that, you also have a whole chapter in the book on feminism and why you're a feminist, and the lessons you've learned from your wife and your 3 daughters, and another whole chapter on intersectionality, right? Talk about those chapters, why they're important to you.
Like, for me, I'm like I was saying yesterday and all the time, is like, obviously I'm an athlete and I'm a famous person, so I get all the credit a lot of the times, but my wife, which is here right there, stand up, can she get a round of applause? Because she's just as equal to me when it comes to all this stuff. So for me, like, watching her go through her journeys and her struggles and what she goes to, and watching her grow up as a woman and a person in the community who builds and does things for people, is an emotional thing. So for me, I'm tied to that, And for my wife, that's everything. So for my kids, it's the same thing. I share those messages with them to let them know, like, shit, I love
It's all right. It's all right, man. Yep. I feel, man. Your wife's an amazing person. I've learned a lot. I found out yesterday some about her background in organizing and activism, and I've realized where you get it.
Nah, for real, like, she's so strong, and like, there's a lot of women who are super strong. If you look at the civil rights movement or any other movement, Harriet Tubman was the person who was going back and risking her life, and Angela Davis, whoever it was, it's always been women who have always stood up, Katrina's right here. She's right here every day fighting for her cousin. Charlene Allows, and she's over there every day fighting for herself. And she's my friend, and to talk to her when she's a mother and she's out there risking every day because what she believes in, it gives me power to know that women are just as equal to men when it comes to everything. And it's not just about just because we have a penis or something like that, it makes us better. No, it just makes us different. But at the same time, they're human beings and they deserve to have respect. You know, when I think about Me Too movement, I think about my daughter. I try to put myself in those situations and how it would feel as a father to think that my daughter was, you know, going through something like that and not being able to have a voice, and she's being victimized because people don't see her as an equal human being. And those are the things that why I feel like it's important for men to be feminists, because we have to be able to speak on issues pertaining to women, or they're going to lose their voice. And who wants their mother to lose their voice? Who wants their wife to lose their voice? Who wants their daughter to lose their voice? We can't have that happen, because, you know, there comes a point where silence becomes dishonesty, and we have to make sure that we're never silent about issues that we believe in.
No doubt. Thank you. Man, that's why we're friends right there, man. In that chapter on intersectionality, I wanna just ask one more question about, because, man, you talk about an issue in there about Palestine that I want to hit on for a second, because I called you up on the phone.
Yeah.
It was only like 2 weeks after we met.
Yeah.
And this was like the scaredest I've ever been on a phone call. Like probably since 8th grade, and I asked a girl out.
And what the girl say?
She said, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, shit, it wasn't that scary.
So I called you up, and I was like, because I just found out you were scheduled to go to Israel on a state-sponsored trip to play in front of Trump and Netanyahu to show this wonderful collaboration between the two. And I was like, man, I haven't told you this, but I was pretty scared, because I was like, I'm gonna tell this guy not to go.
A free
like
trip,
my hero.
first class.
Yeah, free trip.
First class, all the food we can eat. Nah, that was
right. And it's like, what is it, like next week?
I feel like the Matrix when that guy took that steak and we got unplugged.
Right.
But I didn't do it.
Oh man. So I was just like, raised some issues, and I was amazed by how open you were immediately to like wanting to learn more.
No, for me, that was a hard issue, because it was one of those things that, you know, it's polarizing. It's a polarizing conversation about who's right or who's wrong about that situation. And at the end of the day, people are dying every single day. And that's what I connect with. I connect with the bodies and the empathy and the families. And for me, that was an easy choice to be able to not go, because I understand the connection between all people, all oppressed people, the people in Haiti, Native American issues, the women issues, transgender issues. Every type of issue is connected on every single level. And for you to really be a global human being or a global citizen, and you call yourself a true, you know, a true patriot for people, then you have to understand every single issue, and you can't pick and choose which ones matter, because at the end of the day, they all matter. Every time, people always scream like, you know, all lives matter, but not when it comes to certain situations. You know, when you scream all lives matter, then you got to feel the pain when you see Charlene Lau's kids crying for their mother. You got to feel the pain when you see Michael Brown's mother crying for a lost son. You got to feel the pain with Tamir Rice and her family, Sandra Bland, who these people are losing their families. Or when you watch TV, you see the bombs hitting Gaza, you got to feel the pain for people. And I think when you look at the Native American issues, you feel the pain for the people. Or I look at brown people, Spanish people looking at the edge and being pulled from their families. That brings a certain amount of pain to my heart, and it's got to be able to speak on those issues, because those people matter. Those people, they have a voice. And when we sitting up here and we picking and choosing, and we watching the Kardashians or, Family Feud, I love the Family Feud too, but at the same time, it's like, who cares if Kanye drops a new CD when you're looking at the immigration issues? Like, who cares about that kind of stuff when you really look at the core and the essence of what a human being's true job is? It's like we have to be able to connect to people on every single level. And I've never been to a place where I didn't want to help somebody, because I grew up like that. That's the way that my wife grew up, and that's the way that I grew up. And so we're always finding ways to connect to people. And we always think like state, national, city, globally. How do you connect to people and feel people's voices, and you feel people's pain to help them find a way to change?
No doubt, no doubt. So there's another issue you talk about in the book. You have a chapter called "Without Food, Your Ass is Gonna Die." Talk about
First of all, before I talk about this chapter, I have to, recognize somebody who works for my foundation, and all she does is fight food deserts. And Lika, could you stand up, please, real fast?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's like my voice on that. The first time we were working together, and I brought the issue up of sugar, and I was like, sugar stands for slavery. And she was like, okay, now we can talk. And ever since then, we've been really good friends. And
hey, she came into my room and did a lesson on
I
that,
know,
by the way.
and so our foundation that part of my foundation is based on the food deserts and the lack of, nutrition, or the lack of access to, supermarkets and fresh vegetables. I lived in a neighborhood where there was only one grocery store. You live where you live where 20,000 or 60,000 people, and people don't have access to fresh food. And, there's 23.8 million people living in food deserts in America. And I think it's I read something one day that says 6.8 million of them are kids. To think about that, kids, we all take for granted food. And, to think about there's places where, where I go to Haiti and I'm like, oh, wow, people don't have food. And then I'll go to South Dakota with the Sioux tribe and I'm like, well, people don't have food here. I'll drive to downtown somewhere in Seattle and there's homeless people who don't have food. It's like, there's so many food deserts, and food is a big issue because health is wealth, what I'm saying? Health is a part of your growth, and there's kids who go to school every single day that they don't even get one meal. And it's the idea that people don't even understand about the food that they're eating, and how, as an athlete, you are a conduit of brands, and brands come up to you and they offer you large sums of money to speak for them. What do I look like saying that I represent McDonald's when that is not the truth? McDonald's is one of the biggest issues in America. Coca-Cola, like, these are companies that we all share that prey on people that are brown and black every single day. And they put their stuff up, they give us free stuff, and then they give us money to, to merchant, to sell to our people these things that we know that are bad. We look at the brown or the Samoan culture or the black people in these different who dealing with these diabetes issues, and it's all stemming from the food, the greasy foods that we eat. And it's time for us to stop that. And it's time for athletes to step up and really be the ones who say, we're not representing that anymore. We're about the people. And I think that's what's really important.
Yeah. Thank you. So let's make white people uncomfortable right now and talk about...
I think that issue of food, it should make everybody uncomfortable. The idea that, as a human being, as we sit at our table and we break bread and we eat the, salmon, Copper River salmon is really good.
Oh, yeah, I just had some.
And to think that, there's somebody who doesn't even have a piece of bread, let alone breakfast, what I'm saying? And so, that's a hard thing to fathom. And I think we as people have to continuously fight these issues. I think about, there's an iPhone 10, that could recognize your face, or there's a new car that's about to fly, or there's all these new inventions that people are inventing. And me and my brother are like, damn, we're fucking missing a step if we're making flying cars before we feed people, and it's like...
No doubt. That's a crazy contradiction.
That's a crazy contradiction. Damn it, Steve Jobs, I miss you, but shit. I love my iPod, but goddamn, we need to feed the people.
I'm with you. Yeah, no, so moving to the conversation that I think we need to have, that I haven't seen you have yet on this book tour, but the one that I think will definitely help to make people uncomfortable here is about the N-word chapter.
Yeah.
And, you talk about the difference about if a white person uses it and if a black person uses it, but then you kind of actually apologize to your daughters.
Yeah, I think
what's that about?
It's one of those things, like, you have to be able to self-reflect, and like, before you start to go out and try to be like, well, the people should do this, then you have to like self-reflect on what's your part in this. And I played a pivotal part in using the N-word and sharing it in a way that I shouldn't have been sharing it. And so for me, Maya Angelou, reading her words and thinking about how she felt about that, and the disconnect between older black people and younger black people, like what that word means to them, that's a word of that brings up death. That's a word that brings up, segregation. That's a word that brings up, lack of opportunity. That's a word that brings up slavery. That's a word that brings up pain. And for me, growing up, that was an adjective, a pronoun, a verb, being able to use that word in different places and make a sentence make a sense. And for me, the first thing I want to do is apologize to my ancestors, because me using that word the way that I did is basically a slap in their faces. It's basically a slap in their journey or what they've been through. It's basically, discrediting what it meant to them to make it through, slavery, to make it through segregation, to make it through Jim Crow, to make it through all these different issues, and have that word be on top of their head. I think about that word as the last word that Emmett Till heard. I think about that as the last word, people hanging from the tree, whether, Billie Holiday, and they, singing that song, Strange Fruit, Nina Simone. I'm thinking about those are the words that people were that they were hearing before they met their last breath. And so for me, that chapter was a very reflective chapter because it was about the growth from that, and what it means for when I think white people said. I think I apologize to my ancestors because I allowed some of my friends who were white to be able to use that word around me in an unconscious way, and to be able to not let them to be like, look, that word is a word that I shouldn't be using, and your ass should definitely not be using it.
Right? Yeah.
And if you say it again, I'm a karate chop you, so that chapter was really hard because that word brings two different things. I feel like for white people, it's a truth word. It's where life was, what that word mean. It was a word of people who let that word grow, and it was a divide of people who wanted that word to change society. And for us, that word means a lot. It brings back the past. It brings back where we've been and where we need to go. And I think me talking about that word is something that a lot of young black people need to hear and a lot of white people need to hear. They need to understand what that word really means to society, and that when you say it, people know it because they know when they say that word to you, you're gonna get aggy, you're gonna get angry, you're gonna become what they want you to become because it's a word that they know that your ancestors, they think that you need to retaliate. But trying to be yoga and meditating and stuff, it's about bringing that back and making sure that I don't even say that word anymore, so that word has no strength to me anymore.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that perspective because I've heard black people lecture younger black people as if that's the only using that word is why we have problems in our community.
Yeah.
But the perspective you brought to it about the history of that word, and instead of just scolding people who use it, like looking at yourself and trying to root it in that history was powerful to me.
I think you have to do that all the time because when you're talking to people, last thing people want to hear is you coming from a place where you feel like you're better than them and you have no past and you just been perfect. And when when you're able to reflect on it and unmask yourself and be able to share your message, people listen. And I think when you talk about a word that's so dehumanizing, it has to bring up those type of things. You have to look in the mirror and wonder where you were and how you made that word even more powerful. And now you have to take that word back and put it where it needs to be.
And I think I remember you telling the story about the first time you heard it.
Yeah.
You were pretty young.
Yeah.
And I connected with that because I remember I was in preschool.
Yeah.
Somebody called me that. And I had the exact same experience. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was meant at me and not the other kids, right?
Well, because I grew up where it was like, that was just a normal word, like, hey, pass the peas, you know what I mean? Like, where we going? That's my, that was how we talked. And now, for when I heard that word, I felt like he wasn't coming from that place. I felt like he was coming from a place of anger and a place of where he wanted me to be a certain way. And so for me, as I got older, I started to understand, it takes time. When I talk to my friends and I'm like, hey, I'm not using that word anymore, they'd be like, what word are you going to use then? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, there's a million words out there. We can find one. What about duh or bro or chicken or something other than that word? My friends, I'm like, bro, we can say something else. And so, as you say, if you talk to young people and you change the people one by one and they're sharing that message, it becomes like a tree. Everything starts to change. You plant that seed and people start to grow,
Right on. So I want to talk about another phone call I had with you real quick. I called you were on the way to the first preseason game, and I said, did you hear that Marshawn sat for the anthem? Yeah. And you said, yeah, you'd heard about that, but you didn't say anything about what you were about to do.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, did you already know on that bus that you were about to sit for the anthem and really shake up this world? And,
Yeah,
and what's behind the
I
anthem?
think at the time, like I've been talking to Kaepernick and kind of like I felt like without him being in the NFL, the message was going to be lost, and people were going to forget, and we were just going to move on and kick that ball, and we were going to be like, life is great and everybody has equality. And as you watch in Virginia, and you see Charlottesville, and you see all these different things that's happening. You see people dying. You see more police brutality. You see so many more issues that you connected with. You have no choice. I told Coach Carroll, I was like, look, Coach Carroll, like what I've experienced and the people that I've seen and the people that I have represented and the people that I owe this to, I cannot be silent because I owe it to them to have a voice. I owe it to them to share their stories. I owe it to every single person that I have encountered with on my journey to let them know that their story and their voice isn't lost. And having that conversation with Coach Carroll, he kind of understood because he was like, I can't really tell you not to do what you need to do because I understand where you're coming from. And as a man, I told Coach Carroll, I said, Coach Carroll, it's hard for you to understand what it's like to be a black man in this world. I can put this helmet on every single day, but when I take the helmet off, who knows what can happen to me? Who knows how people feel about me? But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because I still got to speak for these people and have that voice. And so that was where my mind was as I saw that. And I felt like it was no choice but to sit and make sure that the message doesn't get lost. And I think we had to do a good job of keep talking about it and making sure that, the message doesn't get lost, like I said.
Yeah. Talk about that message because, of course, the media tries to paint it and Trump tries to paint it as protesting the flag.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot more to it. I mean, one thing to point out is that actually the person that wrote the national anthem was actually celebrating slavery in a verse that we don't sing anymore. But if you go Google it, you will find the verse that celebrates the killing of black slaves.
Yeah, no, I think for me, it's when it comes to Trump and that situation, to me, it's more like propaganda. I think propaganda does something to people's mind. If you look at World War II, like the propaganda made people feel like murdering and exterminating Jewish people was okay because they seen enough propaganda that they started to believe it. With slavery, they seen enough propaganda that they felt like it was okay. And I think for us, people started having propaganda and trying to divide the message. What we were really talking about, the true message was equality and freedom for every single person on this planet. And I think people lost that. And I think that's the most American thing that you can do is fight for equality for other people, regardless of how they look like.
Right on. So you have another chapter in the book called A Moment of Silence.
Yeah.
And I think that connects to why you sat for the anthem this year. And it was one of the most powerful chapters to me, man. Talk about what you did with that chapter.
I think I was talking to one of my friends, who's one of my closest friends, his name Cyril, and I was talking to him, and I was like, bro, I just need to put something in there that's not really in my opinion or really my thoughts on it. It needs to be something that's like really true. And I was like, I think I'm gonna do this. And he was like, that's the one, do that, And so it was like, to put a chapter in there that had no voice and no my opinion, it was just pure facts. It was pure facts that police brutality isn't a black issue or a brown issue. It's just a human being issue. There's people of all colors who have been struck by a tragedy because of the police officers or police brutality, certain people. I don't believe that every single police officer is bad. That's, for me, if you think that, then you just being silly to think that every single person is representing that. But what I was trying to say is that there are a lot of people who dehumanize people and don't see people that have value. And for me, that's what that chapter was about. It was showing that these names are people that get missed. These are true people who lost their life for no apparent reason, who were unarmed and didn't have anything to do with the way that they died, And it was the fact that I wanted people to go research those stories. I wanted people to go find out what their families felt. I wanted people not to be divided on the issue of was it right or was it wrong. I wanted people to bring it back to the human level of it is that everybody, when a person is murdered or a person dies, they're leaving somebody behind. They're leaving kids behind. They're leaving it. As I went to the memorial of Charlene Lyles yesterday, I didn't see tons of people. I saw her family. I saw families. When it was on TV, it was people who were divided. Oh, this. But yesterday, I saw family. I saw kids who were hurt. I saw grandmothers who were hurt. I saw cousins. I saw people who really felt that. And for me, that's what that chapter was about. It was about reconnecting to those families who have lost those voices. We talk those people's name, and we forget that they were somebody. They were mothers. They were fathers. They were brothers. They were sisters. They was teammates. They were somebody that had a voice that lost it. And I think that's what it really boils down to, is really coming back to the essence and being like, oh, a person died. We have been so, we be so desensitized to death that we don't even see death as an issue anymore. We just see it as a part of life, and we just be like, oh, somebody died. Like, what happened? Like, nobody digs into what Anthony Bourdain was going through, why somebody that was so successful takes their own life, or what is Junior Seahawks feeling when he decides to take his life, or what is Kate Spade feeling. We don't never dig into that. We just see it. We go to Burger King or McDonald's, and then we move on with our day. We don't ever try to connect to the families and say, hey, what's the son feeling? What's the mother feeling like? And I think that's what that chapter was really about, was making those people human again.
No doubt. If you haven't seen it yet, that chapter just lists the names of every single person last year who was unarmed and was killed by police, and just listing their names. And it's powerful because it's disproportionately black and brown, but there's also a lot of white people in that chapter too.
It's tons of white people, Asian people. It's just humans. And like at that point, I'm not even looking at color. I'm just looking at humans. I'm just seeing human being, 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 human being. I'm not looking at, oh, is he black, or is he white, or is he Chinese, or is he this, or is he that? I'm just looking at, like, that's a person. That's a person, that's a person, that's a person. I should feel pain for that person. I should feel pain for their families.
I mean, and that gets me to really what was the most scariest phone call that we had. When you called me at 3 a.m, I knew it wasn't good. Thankfully, your name wasn't added to that chapter. Yeah. But, oh, man. That was hard.
No, that was a hard thing because it's, like I said, you live in the public eye, so people want to make their decisions of whether, oh, did he deserve it, or oh, he shouldn't have been there. But at the end of the day, nobody was connected to my kids. Like, for me at that moment, I'm thinking about my wife. I'm thinking about my son. I'm thinking about my daughters. I'm thinking about my brother. I'm thinking about my mom. I'm thinking about my dad. I'm not thinking whether, should he do it or should he not. I'm just thinking about, like, the family, what my kids are going to do if they lose their father. And I'm thinking people didn't connect to that. People wanted to connect to, because it's such a polarizing issue that nobody ever wants to reflect on it. Nobody wants to look in the mirror and be like, there is an issue. It's not till everybody starts to look at it and being like, at the end of the day, is he a human or not? Does he have family? And so for me, that's what really that was about.
Yeah. I mean, when you told me that an officer had put a weapon to your head and threatened your life, all I could think about is losing a friend, and what Seattle was going to lose, and what our movements internationally were going to lose, that we're struggling for justice, and it just found this new voice, and it was overwhelming. I mean, we were upset, crying.
Everybody was upset, but those kind of traumatic issues, they shape you, and they try to, those experiences or those examples or something that it makes you want to have a voice. It makes you want to be able to share your story, because there's a whole bunch of people who that doesn't have a voice, who passed away, that can't speak for themselves, or people who don't know the story. I think my story just brings other people into, okay, let's really look at the underlying issues in America. Let's really find out what's going on and how can we solve these problems.
No doubt. Well, I'm so glad you're with us, and I want you to talk a little bit about what you think the role of an athlete is in social movements.
I think the role of an athlete is a very tricky subject, because people see athletes and they think that athletes should be grateful. You made it. Shut up, be quiet, run that ball, dunk it, jump over that hurdle, do what you can. I need to be entertained today. It's Sunday, 1 o'clock. I had a long-ass week, and the Seahawks need to win. And maybe I'll do something after. So athletes, you're dealing with brands, you're dealing with your team, you're dealing with the fans, and you have to make a conscious choice of what is it that really matters. Is it the wins? The wins do matter in a certain place, or is it your humanity? You're challenging your humanity versus morals and the ethics of money and all these different things, and you have to make a choice of, like, what am I supposed to do? I have great leadership and great people before me who've done the things that they're supposed to do when they were athletes and they had a voice, whether it was John or Dr. Harry Edwards or whether it was Muhammad or Craig Hodges, whoever it was, Kaepernick, whoever it was, there's so many great examples. And now I live in a generation where I've been, where we got LeBron James, an athlete who has everything to lose, but still is able to speak on social issues in a way that hasn't been done before. And I think with his leadership, it allows us to be able to speak and have a voice. I think that's something that we really have to share, and I think we play a big role because we are people look up to us. We are real role models, but our role model doesn't stop at shoe brands. Our role model doesn't stop at fast food or selling these different products. Our role model really starts at the core of what it really is, where we can't be silent, about real issues. That is really what a role model is. That is really what we're supposed to be doing when we get up there on that platform. Of course, we're supposed to score the touchdowns, do the dunks, but at the same time, we're also supposed to speak for the people who don't have a voice. And every single athlete knows that, is whether or not we choose to do it or not. And whether we are able to walk amongst fear and make sure that, what people write about us doesn't bother us, or the brands that we lose. Because when you talk about stuff like that, you lose brands. That's just pure economics. People don't want to choose between right or wrong. They want to choose what they think is going to sell. Business is about bottom line. It's not about the extras. If that was the case, Shell Oil would not be in the Amazon leaving residue behind, or people drilling oil on Native American lands, or Flint, Michigan oil, or the issues with gun violence wouldn't be an issue because people would be like, at the end of the day, that is right. Like, kids should be safe at school, And so for me, that's really what athletes have a voice is that we can share. We're the only people who were able to have 1 billion people at one time through Instagram and Twitter, and we share things about things that we're doing, but we never share about issues that are affecting our humanity and our communities.
No doubt, and right on. I'm glad you said the names of John Carlos and Muhammad Ali, and we've had some incredible sports figures from throughout history who have jumped all the way into social movements and helped amplify them and been a big part of it. But one thing that you write about in the book is how what's missing was like an organization, like coming together in collective struggle.
Yeah, I think, I just wanted to write about an organization that was kind of like, like the Red Cross, or an organization that represents athletes, that athletes have voices around the whole world. Because there's an athlete who plays soccer that's from Senegal, that plays for France, who's seeing all these issues in Senegal, and he needs the people to support him on those issues. Or Maya Moore, or all these different athletes who are dealing with issues, or the trans and transgender issues that are happening within the women's sports or men's. I was in in New Zealand and watching the Commonwealth Games, and there was an issue there, and to be able to have a collective voice of athletes around the world to really show what we really are truly about and the humanity, and that if we had created an organization, people won't be scared to share their feelings because they'll have support. They'll have Ronaldo, they'll have Messi, they'll have people who are dealing with things that we can share our message and share our struggles and unmask ourselves to really show who we are as human beings.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And I mean, we've been talking about that idea for a while, and then jumping into working with Athletes for Impact has been amazing, and I hope it takes off and a lot of other athletes get on board, because I think that power could really transform not only the sports world, but the whole world.
Yeah, true story.
No doubt. I want to begin to wrap up here, but you look good tonight, and I'm wondering.
Thank you. I was unsure.
Did you get that from Africa?
Yeah, I just got back from Africa and Senegal, and for me, that was like a really inspiring trip. It was a very transformational trip. It was everything that I needed at the time of my life. As my friends text me, I'm like, man, I'm having such a great time. But it was a very reflective trip, because me being African American and not having a connection to Africa, but not really having a connection to, the history of America, because the history of an African American person in America starts with the transatlantic slave, and it starts with post-colonialism. It starts with it starts with colonialism for us, and for us, that's hard to deal with. That's a hard path to see a brighter future when you look at and you think about only the heart and the pain that people felt, never talking about the true journey of the African slave or the African American, And so for me, going back to Africa was that connection. It was the connection to the past, and it was connection to who I am as a person, because my ancestors are Mandinka. They are true warriors. So for the essence, I'm already built for a warrior, because I am a Mandinka. You know what I'm saying? So for me, that journey was a true journey, because every night was a reflective night. I'm not scared to admit that every night was an emotional night for me, because it was, I cried with my wife on multiple occasions on that night, for us to sit there and be there and think about, my grandmother left this place 400 years ago, and I'm the first person to actually bring her spirit back, or bring her essence back, to think about, as a father, if I lose my daughter in a safe way, I go crazy. I'm like, where is she? Where is she? Where is she? And to think that my grandfather, he lost his daughter and never ever saw her again. That's a painful thing to deal with. A very reflective thing. I dealt with that with rage. I dealt with that with calmness. I dealt with that with patience. I dealt with that with elegance. At the same time, was to be able to, understand and be able to feel that. To walk into the house of slaves and and think about all these people at the bottom of this building being treated like animals as people watch, women and mothers and child getting torn apart, fathers being just 3 feet away from their child, hearing their child yell, but to be helpless. To be helpless and not be able to change what is happening to your child as they're being chained, as they're being sold, as they're being prodded, as they're being fed to be sold like cattle. That's a very reflective thing for a human to deal with. That is one of the most hardest things I've ever had to deal with, because that is the truth. That is not fake. That's not fictional. These are facts. These are facts. The chains of my ancestors are still there. The history is still there. I look at the point of no return, an empty hallway, people being drugged from their family as they scream, and nails stuck into walls as they crawl, and they try not to be sold, they try not to be pulled from their child and thrown on a boat, never to realize what has ever happened to their family or their children or their husband, only to be feel like lost, and rather take their lives and just jump over at the end of the boat than rather to be slaves. And for that, at the same time, that's what the bottom looks like. The bottom looks like that. The bottom looks like that, but at the top is very comfortable. There's a white guy up there who has a plush living room, like a Manhattan, New York apartment, with all the fine things, a nice view of the ocean in Senegal, because Senegal is on the ocean, and a plush bathroom, and as many concubines as he wanted, as people rape and as they rape the women every single day. A woman had to deal with that. So it's not just dealing with the essence of slavery and oppression. It's also dealing with women's issues, as a woman's body is being controlled and she has no way of being free, because that man holds the keys to her life. It's either death or sex. So what do you think she's gonna have to do? Some women took their life, others dealt with sex. And so for that's a hard thing to deal with. And every single night, that was a passionate and emotional thing as I sit under the moonlight, and it's beautiful as the stars are bouncing off the ocean, and the moon is as bright as a New York City and Times Square. The moon is coming bouncing off the ocean, and I'm very reflective, as I sit there in calmness, and I pray and I think about the water going back and forth and what it feels like at night. As my ancestors on that boat, every night hearing this water and calling out and singing spiritual songs that, reflective of who they are as Mandinkas and who they are as Fulani and Jollof people, if they're singing and not being able to speak the same dialect and knowing that they can never ever be back. That is a journey that not everybody can take. That is a journey that I cannot take alone. I had to go with my wife. I could have never done that alone if I didn't have a strong woman who was able to let me be emotional, who was able to be emotional and to be understanding. Not like oh, don't do that, but to listen, you know. And I think that is what I took from that trip, is the pain and the anguish of things that I won't let happen again, things that I know that shouldn't happen again, and to be able to share this story with other young black people who can take this journey for them, but other Caucasian people, so they can hear the pain of what that feels like when you're in there and you hear chains popping and you see what, what it is to be confined, and what it is for a person not to eat, but to be funneled food through their mouth so they can be healthy enough to sell. Those things are hard things to deal with, and then while you're in Africa, there's some emotional times for me there, but the young girls who I felt that one of my schools that we deal with computer science and technology, that we dealt with kids, we sat around tables with young women that are powerful. They're some of the most powerful, young, confident women I've ever seen in my life. They're dealing with things that we can never deal with. We get mad when we in traffic and we can't, the goddamn Uber's taking too long. We get mad when we at Chick-fil-A and they ran out of Chick-fil-A sauce. Like, I love Chick-fil-A sauce too. But when you at Chick-fil-A and they run out of Chick-fil-A sauce and they ain't got no more Polynesian sauce, you get mad, And these women are dealing with, these young girls are dealing with real life issues. As we sit there and we talking to these young girls, me and my wife, we sit back and we listen. Obviously, we don't speak the language, and so we talk to our translator and we say, hey, what do you kids want to be? And every single kid said something that I never thought I'd hear kids say. I heard one girl say, she said, I want to be a police officer. I asked her why. She said, because I want to stop the rapes. I want to stop people from getting raped. I saw one girl, she was like, I want to be a doctor. My mom died from in the hospital because we had no way of getting her into the room. So people in Senegal die every single day because they don't have a waiting room, and they pick and choose who they want, or they don't have IV. I want to be an IV technician so people don't die and they can get their IVs. Or I want to stop cancer, so because we don't have any cancer centers here. I want people to stop dying for HIV. It's like those are the things that kids that are going through something are thinking about. They're not thinking about when I'm gonna get my latest iPad or when there's something like that. When somebody tells you something so powerful, like, I'm so poor, I can't even hope no more. Hope is the last thing that we all hold on to. Hope is the thing that what gets us through so many situations as people is hope. It's the idea that there could be a better day. But when somebody tells you, I don't even have hope no more, because I want to come to school and eat, but I don't have food. I want to be great, but there is no opportunity. And for me, that's what that trip was about. It was about realizing that, there's issues around this world that people that don't have a voice, and my job and my wife's job is to continuously build bridges and help people go through things and help them find solutions. And that's what that trip was about. It was about making amends for my ancestors and letting them rest. And it was also about going home and doing the work that needs to be done for my people. And I think that's what that trip was about.
Good? And that's beautiful, Michael. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man.
Thank you so much. No, I mean, I was so glad to hear that you were going to Africa and that you were going to come back. And I feel like there's a new glow that you have, knowing where you come from.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see what you do with it.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a very challenging thing too, because you have to, you make promises to kids. I made promises to people. I made promises to people that I was going to bring food back. I made promises that I was going to help them get water. I made promises to women who, in this one particular village where one of the tribes is that I'm from, the tribal leader is very different. The chief, he's a different kind of chief, and a lot of times, women don't have a voice. This is one of the first chiefs who gave women land. He told the women, do what you want to do, make money, and do what you can for the kids. So these women wake up every single day, and we had to help them pull the well, the water. I'm talking about the water got to be at least 500 feet under the earth, and we have to pull up the water, and that's, that takes a whole day to water the vegetables so they have enough to sell and the car so they can build schools for their kids, because their kids don't have school, they don't have teachers, but they want to be able to do that. So for me, those promises that I made to those people are things that I can't let them down about. So that is just another, journey for me and my family to make sure that we keep our promises. And it's good that you make promises to people, because those people keep us honest, you know what I'm saying? So for me and my wife, we just want to make sure that we do what we can to help, society in a positive way.
I'll Be there right next to you, helping out however I can. Hey, everybody, Michael Bennett.
Thank you, thank you.
Hi. This is your last chance to pull some cards together. We'll be circulating through, and I'm going to ask as many questions as I can get to, and then we'll give you all a chance to meet Michael out in the other room. It's really hard to ask a fun, ice-breaky starter question after that, Michael. I just got to be honest. Okay. So, is it all right if I keep it real for a little while longer, and then this just was handed to me. Following the ridiculous directive for NFL players to stand for the anthem or not to be on the field, what's the chance that all players may stay inside when next season opens, or more likely that they will choose another method of expression?
You just said I'm going to ask a fun question. I thought you were going to what's your favorite color? Do you want to go Disney World?
No, I can't go there yet.
So that's not even fun. That's like a real question. Look,
I can't go to fun yet.
I always just it's a new issue. It's like we haven't had no time to reflect on what should we do, or how should we, talk about these issues. But for us, I think at the core of it, I think for us it's really about community. It's really about how can we take these organizations and these teams and hold them accountable for the things that they do within the community, and making sure that they give back to every single neighborhood. Because like I said this before, like the people in the East like Seattle Seahawks, the West, the North, the South, everybody wants to be a part of the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seattle Seahawks owe it to every community to make sure that every community has a voice. And I think that's what we really are trying to do within the context of what we're trying to do within the policy of the new NFL, is to try to make sure that the NFL represents all the people that love their team. The brown people need a voice, the women need a voice, the black people need a voice, the Asian people need a voice. Everybody needs a voice when it comes to this. And we also owe it to, if kids don't have books in their school, or if you look at rent-to-issue when there's no lunch or something, that we should be the team who steps up and make sure that all kids in Seattle eat. Not just, just serving on Sundays. We deserve to serve every single day to Seattle when we play for the city.
Would sports be any different if there were more black owners?
I don't know if sports would be different. I think at the end of the day, it's just about human interaction. I think it's not really about sports when I look at the world. I really look at the world as a global citizen. I look at the world as a way of what is it to take to humans to realize that another human matters. That's at the end of everything, is how do we look in the mirror and find a way to be like, this person matters regardless of their color, their religion. I put that past everything, the Dalai Lama always says, like, secular ethics, like, people before religion, people before democratic, people before Seattle or the 49ers, although I love the Seattle Seahawks, but people on the 49ers are still people. And it's like, when do we come back to that? When do we come back to the core of everything, and realizing that at the end of the day, it's our obligation as other human beings to recognize when another human being is going through something, and that we have a choice in making sure that it doesn't happen to them.
So I have to interject my own, because I want to get to other people's questions. I have to say this to you. There's a quote that's incredibly inspiring to me that I don't have memorized, but it basically says that the role of the artist in the world is to make it impossible for somebody to stand in front of a mirror in the morning and shave without thinking about all the other people around them in the world who are suffering profoundly. That an artist will have done their work when a person is not able to function in their day without acknowledging and trying to do something in their day to serve other people who don't have what they have. I feel like you have reinvented the role. I just need to say this, y'all. You have reinvented the role of an athlete. To be able to do that, the profound message of empathy that you bring through your work is like nothing I've ever heard before. It's a whole different idea of heroism through athletes.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
So thank you. I've got that off my chest.
Thank you, man. I'm honored that you feel that way, man.
Well, I do. What do you think your children's biggest challenge is going to be?
I think my children's biggest challenge is, as young women, to find their roles in society in a way that they could be positive, change makers. I talk to my daughters about change making. Me and my wife live in a place, we live in our mind is like, how can we make our kids reflective on society? How can they not? They've been blessed with much, but they cannot forget about where they came from, or they can't forget about other people. So we take our kids through this journey of like, change, this journey of visiting places that they would never visit on their summer break, or going to native reservations, or visiting homeless shelter, or trying to visit people in prison, or, going to different things, because I think it's really important that's my daughter's biggest challenge is empathy, because they live in a world that lacks empathy. They live in a world that lacks compassion. So that's the biggest challenge that we all deal with. Is like, how do we have empathy for people? How do we have compassion when that is not an everyday thing? The everyday thing is to post about oneself. The everyday thing is to post about how I feel. It's never about the other world. The Facebook is just me, 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 me. To live in a world where it's only me, 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 and now I can only think about what it's going to be like in 10 years, they might make up a new word for me.
This was the fun question. What's Martellus up to these days?
Martellus, my brother, he's doing what he's always done. He's always been a creative being, and he's always been a creative trap in a large body. He's a giant. He's trapped in that body. But I feel like this is the first time that he's at peace. It's the first time that, for me, my brother, because I was telling my wife this, and I was like, man, I want my brother to play another year, and she was like, no, you sound like everybody else. Like, let him go into where he wants to go. Let him be a human. Don't tell him that this is the only way that he can identify with himself. This is his only value. And I think that was the journey for myself, to come with my own, acceptance of him retiring, because our relationship has been we've been so tied together our whole life that our relationship is like no other. Like my brother is like my best friend. So it's like when he retired, I feel like, damn, I need to retire. Like, I have nobody to talk to about sports. And so now he's just in a place where he's just really peaceful. He's journeying through his creativity. He's moving. He's doing so many things for the community through creativity, creating new books, creating so many different things. And Ken's doing things, working with Hulu, working with Facebook, and doing his dream. And I think that's the best thing he ever did, because everybody always told him what his dream was. His dream should be dunking the ball in the NBA or catching touchdowns. And I was very lucky for him to see him write his own story. He even wrote his own. He wrote the funniest retirement statement. Every other retirement statement is like, I love football. Football has been the greatest thing for me. He quoted Walt Disney. He quoted Martin Luther King. He quoted so many different people, Steve Jobs. So that was like him. He just kind of ran away in a funny, creative way, and that's my brother in a nutshell. And I think now he can truly be his full self now, not having teams and people telling him how he can think and when he can think and what he can do. He just does what he wants to do, and I think that's the most beautiful thing about it.
Amen.
Isn't he rapping now too?
He does everything. He does rap, he does music, he does everything. He's just creative, man. He just wants to be, he wants to tap into that side of himself.
You talk in your book about increasing opportunities for women within the NFL. Do you think there's something this is something the league will work towards, and how do you think it could be achieved?
I think it's just I think the NFL has played it took us for Ray Rice to realize that domestic abuse is a big issue in the NFL. So I think it's going to take us 10 or 15 years to realize that women can be an important part. They could be general managers, they could be players, they could be whatever they want to be. So I don't know how we get there, but I think it's the women and the men, voicing their opinions. When you see a woman ref out there, you're like, yeah, we're making progress, Or you see a woman coach in the NBA, you're like, yeah, we're making progress. And I think that, for us to have our true voice, it needs to be able for women to have their voice and be reflective about where their place is in the sports industry, and to be able to continuously have a voice. So the NFL has a lot of work to do, and I think we have a lot of players who are willing to, step up and do the work, so everybody can have that fair shot at what they really love.
I'm sorry for all the ricocheting around, but you've proven you can go kind of anywhere the questions take you. So how has your faith helped you in times of persecution? What's your reaction to, and follow up, what's your reaction to the Bible being twisted to support the current child separation issue at the border?
Like I said, that's a real hard question. But like I said, it's propaganda. People want to find a way to make what they're doing feel good, And for us, it's not really about, the Bible doesn't have to tell us that what is happening is wrong. We see it with our eyes when you look and you see stuff like that. It doesn't take a book to recognize that. I think that's kind of like, I think that's a cop-out to be like, oh, it's telling us to do that. No, it doesn't tell us to do that. It tells us to, we're going to be judged on how we treat the poor and the unfortunate. And if that's the case, we're being judged really poor right now. We're like Mariah Carey on New York City, Times Square. I love Mariah Carey though. If we're being judged on how we treat the poor right now and the unfortunate, then I don't know what to tell you, because it doesn't look like, we're going anywhere good from here.
You mentioned both the brotherhood on football teams and black athlete activism, but there are no large examples of white athletes being activists for civil rights or BLM.
I think that's wrong.
All right, let's hear it.
I think Chris Long is a guy that I work with, and Chris Long, he's one of my good friends, and I talk to him all the time. I think he is like one of the main people, whether it's building, water wells in Tanzania or donating money to educational system or standing up to Donald Trump. Chris Long, he's one of the people who really understands. And to me, the thing that makes it really, truly amazing is that he comes from a place where he doesn't have to speak. He doesn't have to do this, but because he has empathy and compassion for people, Chris always steps up. Stephen Hoshka is a great prayer example. Justin Britt, there's so many great examples, people who are stepping up. And could we have more? Could we use a Tom Brady? Of course we could, but.
And we got Sue.
We'll just let that hang in the air for a moment. What's your best advice for teachers, she says specifically white women, who teach a diverse student population?
I think for that question is to listen. I think a teacher or a person has to listen to the stories and the journeys of their class. I think a lot of times teachers want to tell, they want to personify their own story and what they've been through. When I was little, I walked to school, and we can't do that anymore. Some of these kids, they're living in broken homes. Some kids are homeless. Some kids are going through stuff, and the teacher has to be able to have empathy and compassion and to be able to listen to them. And I think that's what a teacher could do. She could find out what's really happening, because people really change when you really get into their stories and you ask them, why? What's going on to you? Why didn't you eat? And then they can have a voice, and kids are more likely to tell you what's going on, and then you can have a better outcome for their schoolwork.
That's right.
People also get Jesse's book.
Read Jesse's book.
To Teaching Black Lives at School.
Respect.
It's a very informative book, because people will think that it says Teaching Black Lives at School, that it's only about black lives. But in that book, it's really about every single issue. Homophobia, Islamophobia. It's about all kinds of phobias that people are dealing with, or kids are dealing with. And it's a way for teachers to look at the book and talk to the kids about the stories of their journey of Native people, the stories of, what it is to be Black Lives Matter. And it kind of takes the stigmas off of it for people to be able to have an understanding of it.
Yeah, teachingforblacklives.org.
All right.
Thank you, Michael.
We'll push it out tomorrow on our Facebook feed, whatever we do on Facebook. I got like 4 more. What is the responsibility of white people as we are called upon to help end racism? Ooh. That's a big one. Responsibility.
I think it's not the people who have been from privilege or some of the oppressors to tell the oppressees when they should protest or when they should talk or when they should do this and how they should do it. It's more about people listening and trying to not put themselves in the story and being like, well, that's not true. It's about like, okay, so what is your journey? And I think it just takes a lot of empathy, and I don't want to keep saying empathy and compassion, but it's the truth. It's for white people to really understand the history of what really happened, what it really feels like for black people to live in America, what it feels like for somebody to be judged on the color of their skin and not the content of their character. White people are given the benefit of the doubt when they first being met. We're not given that benefit of the doubt. And I think white people really have to take hold of that and understand if they really want to stop racism and stop oppression, then they have to be the voices of the people and to be able to say, like, I heard it and I need to speak the truth. Thank you.
Okay, and this comes from a 9-year-old boy. What can I do as a 9-year-old white boy to make people of color's lives better?
Man, just touch one person's life every day. As a 9-year-old boy, I wouldn't tell you that your job is to fight oppression. Your job is to be a young child and live your life, but live your life in a way that, you have empathy and compassion from the beginning to the end. I don't even kill ants anymore, because I have compassion for ants. And my wife is really like, you need to kill that roach. But I'm like, no, let him free. Let him free, Like, that's really how, we got to live. You got to start like that, And for a 9-year-old boy, I would just say, hey, man, just have empathy for other people. Try to be understanding and don't be so judgmental. And go into situations without any expectations, Go into situations, not assuming, but being able to listen and to understand.
I screwed those up because that was supposed to be the last question, but I've got two more that are indicative of a whole other strain of questions that indicate how much people care about you. And they are, how do you prevent yourself from becoming overwhelmed with all the shitty stuff in our world and in our past? How do you yourself?
I think, one of my favorite monks, a Buddhist monk, he said, you must realize that there's sorrow, but you must realize that there's sun. And so every day you got to realize that there's sorrows in the world, but there also is joy in the world. And so for finding balance in that world, of finding like that there's so many things that happen, but at the same time, I get to look at my children, I get to look at the great things, the work that people are doing, and finding great balance in that. It's a very thin line to walk on because there's so much shit happening that it's hard to find joy, but we must find joy to really dig deep in ourselves and find our true purpose, because if we let the world decide what our purpose is, we'll never reach our full joy. And I think that's what we have to do.
And finally, what are you doing to take care of your brain?
My brain?
Yeah, your brain.
I can't say it without getting suspended,
Ladies and gentlemen, Jesse Hagopian and Michael Bennett.